Welcome back to Whisper of the Night. Tonight, I want to tell you a story. One you've never heard in the schoolyard and never seen in any bright, polished fairy tale collection. This is a story about hunger, about the things we wish for, the gifts we think will save us, and the silent, beautiful way they can destroy everything we love. In the small town of Hollow Creek, they used to say nothing good ever happened until one girl opened her mouth and gold fell from her tongue. At first they called it a miracle, then they called it salvation. And in the end, they called it something much darker. Stay with me, because sometimes the price of getting everything you ever wanted is higher than any curse. They used to say nothing good ever came out of Hollow Creek. Not the thin corn that barely survived the frost. Not the families that drank themselves to sleep in sagging trailers. Not the children who left and never came back. So when the miracle happened, they almost didn't believe it. It started the night Clara Weaver thought she might starve. Her father had been sick so long his hands were only bone. Her mother kept the cupboards locked, afraid even hope would steal the last crumbs. And Clara, just 16, was too tired to pray. She walked down to the river that cut through the edge of town. The water was low that summer, glinting darkly under the moon. Some people said it was cursed, that once it had swallowed a whole settlement. But she liked the quiet there, how no one asked her to be anything at all. That was where she met it. No one ever agreed what it looked like. Some claimed it was an old woman with a face of ash. Others said it was a shadow shaped like a deer. Clara only remembered the voice, like rusted wind chimes, soft and cold. "Child," it rasped, "your mouth is worth more than your hunger." She thought it was mocking her. But then the shadow reached out a hand, if it was a hand, and brushed her lips. The touch was lighter than a moth's wing, and when she tried to scream, her voice turned to gold. A single word, no, fell heavy at her feet. A lump of perfect gold, still warm from her throat. For a moment she could only stare. The town's debts, her father's medicine, the hunger, it could all vanish. But when she looked up again, the shadow was gone. And in the hush that followed, she wondered if she had dreamed it, but the gold remained, gleaming dully in the moonlight. When she finally carried it home, she felt something in her chest. Not hope exactly, more like the first bright edge of a knife. The first gold piece paid for her father's medicine. The second bought groceries, real food, not just cans dented at the back of the store. The third fixed the roof that had leaked since Clara was 10. Her parents didn't ask questions, they just cried. And when word got out, as it always does in small towns, no one believed it, until she spoke in front of Pastor Jim, and her whispered "Amen" clinked against the church floor like dropped treasure. That was when Hollow Creek changed, no longer forgotten, no longer broken. They called her a blessing, a second chance sent by heaven. The golden saint of Hollow Creek. People brought their sorrows to her like prayers. A woman begged for enough gold to keep her children in school. A farmer wept about losing his land to the bank. The old librarian, who hadn't spoken in years, asked her for just one coin to keep the doors open. Clara gave, and gave. She would sit on the bench in front of the chapel every Sunday, her voice soft as a hymn, dropping coins from her tongue like tiny suns. And when she saw their eyes wet with gratitude, she felt a kind of joy that she had never known hunger could lead to. She didn't speak much outside those moments, only when it mattered, only when someone needed saving. Because every time she spoke, she could feel it. A pulling in her chest, a strange heat behind her teeth. Not pain, not yet. Just a quiet reminder, miracles too are made of flesh. At first, they said thank you. They placed flowers on her porch, brought pies and preserves, old quilts stitched with trembling hands. Someone painted her a sign. Clara Weaver, Voice of Gold. It hung outside the post office where people lined up every Saturday, smiling, patient, hopeful. But gold does something to people. Even the good ones. It's soft in your hand, but sharp where it lives inside your want. Soon the line grew longer, the asks bigger. Just enough to start a business, someone said. A little more for a second tractor, said another. Speak again, Clara. For the town. For our children's future. She tried to say no once. Her throat had been sore, her bones cold. But the look on their faces like she had slapped them. "She's changing," they whispered. "She's getting greedy." That word stung more than any wound she'd ever had. So she spoke. She spoke until her voice came out dry and cracked, until the gold burned hot against her tongue, until her mouth bled in tiny pretty flecks no one noticed. They only saw the shine. At night, Clara would press her fingers to her lips, feeling the place where softness used to live. She'd whisper nothing to the dark, hoping nothing would turn to gold, but even her breath began to hum with weight. It began with her teeth, the back ones first, crumbling like old sugar, then the front, loosening, gold clinging to the roots like rusted vines. When she smiled, the children looked away. She started carrying a cloth with her to catch the coins when they fell from her lips. No one asked why her hands shook when she folded it. At night, she dreamed she was drowning, but not in water, in molten metal, heavy and shining. Pressing her chest flat, she would wake gasping, her mouth filled with the taste of pennies, her throat raw from silent screaming. Her mother tried to make her rest, but by then the town had learned how to knock in shifts. They came at dawn, at dusk, at midnight. They knocked until her heartbeat matched the rhythm of their want. "Just one word, Clara," they'd plead through the door. "One word so we can keep the farm. A sentence to buy medicine for my boy. A blessing. You have so much to give." And she did, until she didn't. Her hair began to fall out in brittle strands. Her gums bled in her sleep. When she spoke, the coins came slower, sometimes cracked, the gold flecked with red. They took them anyway. They called her sacrifice beautiful. Once she caught her reflection in the church window. Her skin looked waxy, stretched too tight across her cheekbones. Her eyes, once so bright, were the dull colour of old brass. In that moment, she wondered if she was dying, or if she had already died, and this was simply what it looked like to be worshipped. But when she turned away, they were waiting. Dozens of faces she had known all her life. Neighbours, classmates, people who had once brought her pies and flowers. Now they only brought their hunger. And Clara, she had forgotten how to say no, so she opened her mouth and let herself bleed. By winter, she could barely stand. Her father had boarded up the front porch, hoping to keep them out. But the townspeople only gathered in the yard, their breath steaming in the cold, their eyes fixed on the house as if it were the last church left standing. They called her name in the dark, soft at first, almost gentle. "Clara," they whispered, "we need you." When she didn't come, their voices grew harder, scraping against the walls like wind-driven branches. "You owe us," someone shouted. "Don't be cruel." Her mother tried to send them away, but no one listened. They knew she was in there. They knew she could save them. Because in Hollow Creek, money was running thin again. Crops had failed, bills had come due, the banks were circling like crows. It didn't matter that her hair had thinned to wisps, that she wrapped scarves around her throat to hide the sores, that when she did manage to speak, her voice came out in a ragged wheeze. They told themselves she was blessed. They told themselves she was stronger than she looked. And she tried to believe it too. Some nights, she sat by the wood stove with her mother, cupping her cracked hands around a mug she could no longer lift. She'd close her eyes and remember the first coin, how clean it had seemed, how miraculous, how she had believed it could make things better. She still wanted to believe. So when they broke down the door, she didn't scream. She didn't even flinch. They surrounded her, neighbours, friends, people she'd grown up with, their faces pale and desperate, their eyes shining with that same terrible hope. A woman she had once shared a school desk with knelt beside her. "Please," she sobbed, clutching Clara's hand, "just one more time." Clara looked into her face and saw what she'd become. A vessel, a mouth, a promise no one would let die. Her father tried to pull them away, but he was too weak. They dragged her to the church, laid her on the altar beneath the wooden cross. Candles flickered in the draught, throwing shadows that looked like claws. Someone pressed a hand to her chest, as if to keep her heart beating. Someone else cupped her chin. "Speak," they begged. And she did. She opened her mouth, her lips split, skin tearing like paper. A gout of golden coins tumbled out, spattered in blood. A roar went up, cheers, sobs, relief. They fell to their knees to gather her words. No one noticed she had stopped breathing, not at first, because they were too busy filling their pockets. Morning came soft and grey over Hollow Creek. Frost glimmered on the church windows, and the candles had all burned out, leaving only curls of black smoke. They found her lying there, her lips parted, her skin the colour of old wax, her eyes open to nothing. In her final moment, she hadn't screamed, she hadn't begged, she had only let the last word leave her mouth, so they could have what they thought they needed. They called it a mercy, they called it a sacrifice, they called her a saint because it was easier than calling themselves what they were. In the days that followed, the town glowed with her riches, debts paid, houses repaired, food in every pantry. The golden coins she had bled lay stacked in neat little towers, each one stamped with the mark of her last breath. But when they tried to spend them to trade a life for comfort, the coins crumbled. The gold flaked away to ash in their palms, drifting on the wind like a curse. No one spoke of it aloud, but they all understood. It had never been about the money. It had been about hunger, the kind that grows when you feed it, the kind that eats everything you are. And late at night, when the houses were dark and the wind scraped the eaves, some said you could still hear her voice, thin as moth wings, calling from the ruins of the old church. Not to forgive, not to condemn, just to remind them that they had never truly been poor until the day they learned how to spend her.